A drifter collapsed at her fence post at dusk. He was the wealthiest man in the state. The post was lodgepole pine. I know that because my cheek was against it and the bark had a particular smell, sap, and rot together, something gone wrong in the wood. And I held on to it like it was the last solid thing in the world, which, for me, that evening, it was. I don't know how long I'd been walking, 3 days, maybe 4. There had been a creek at some point, and I'd drunk from it face down like an animal. There had been a night I couldn't account for just blackness and then light again, and my boots were still on, which I took as a good sign. The cold was the kind that doesn't feel like cold anymore. It feels like nothing, and that's when it'll kill you. I heard the hinges before I heard the voice. A gate swinging, that particular creak of iron that a gate makes when it's been left to rust, and then boots on frozen ground, and then a woman saying, quietly like she was talking to herself, "Lord." Not as a prayer, as a statement of fact. I tried to turn my head, got about halfway. She didn't run, didn't call out to anyone. Just stood there a moment, and I could hear her breathing, the measured kind, the kind of breathing a person does when they're deciding something, and then she was beside me, and she had my arm over her shoulder, and she was stronger than she looked. Or maybe I weighed less than I used to, probably both. My name is Callum Greer. I say that now because it takes some telling before it matters. In November of 1887, Callum Greer owned 412,000 acres of ranchland across 3 counties in Montana Territory. He had a main house with 8 rooms, 3 line shacks, 2 hay barns, and a bunkhouse that slept 14. He had a cattle herd that took 6 days to ride the length of. He had a reputation that preceded him into any room he walked into by about 30 seconds. You could see it on men's faces, the small adjustment they made when they realized who they were talking to. He also had, apparently, no ability to survive a November blizzard on the open plain. I'd been riding the north fence, something I still did myself, a habit from the early years I'd never broken, when the storm came in faster than anyone expected. Those storms don't give warning. They come off the mountains like a fist. The horse went lame in the second hour, and I set her loose rather than drag her down with me, which I've wondered about since, whether that was wisdom or just the first bad decision in a long chain of them. I walked due south by instinct and memory and whatever passes for luck, and sometime on the second night I lost the direction. I don't tell people this story. I'm telling it now because enough years have passed that I can say it plainly. I was dying, not the slow kind, the kind where your body starts making its peace with the ground. And then there was the fence post, the smell of bad pine sap, the sound of iron hinges. Her name was Nora Falk. She'd come west from Minnesota 4 years earlier with her husband, Einar, who died of a ruptured appendix in the spring of his 2nd year on the land. She'd stayed. That's the first thing you need to understand about her. She had every reason to go back east, and she stayed. Not out of stubbornness, though there was some of that, out of something harder to name. She decided the land was hers now. Einar had died on it, which meant something to her I didn't fully understand until later. She had 80 acres, a house that needed the south wall rebuilt, a small hay meadow, 4 milk cows, and a kitchen garden she kept under straw in the winter. She had a dog named Hector who was old and half-blind and barked at everything anyway out of principle. She did not have a ranch hand or a neighbor within 4 miles. She got me inside. I don't remember much of it. I remember the floor being warmer than the air, which doesn't make physical sense, but that's how it felt. And I remember the stove light, orange and low, and the smell of wood smoke and something boiling. Venison, I found out later. She'd put it on before dark. She sat me in a chair near the stove and pulled off my boots without asking permission, which I appreciated, since I couldn't have done it myself. My feet were bad. Not lost them bad, but she spent the better part of an hour with them in a basin of water that she kept adjusting. A little warmer, until they hurt again, which she told me was the good kind of hurting. "Who are you?" she asked at some point. Not demanding, just asking. I told her my name. She nodded once, like she'd heard it before, but it didn't particularly impress her in either direction, and went back to the feet. I was there 11 days. The first 4 I wasn't good for much. A fever came in on the second night. She told me later it was high enough that she'd sat up with me through it, which I had no memory of at all. I remember fragments, the weight of blankets, a candle burning low on the table, the sound of wind against the window glass doing what wind does against glass. Once I woke and she was in the chair beside the bed reading, a lamp turned low beside her, and she didn't look up, just said, "Go back to sleep," the way you'd say it to someone you'd known a long time. I went back to sleep. On the 5th day, I could sit up and eat without help. She brought me broth, and then, when I kept it down, actual food, biscuits, a piece of the venison, coffee that was strong enough to peel paint. I ate all of it and didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. She'd saved my life, and we both knew it, and sometimes the plain fact of a thing is enough. She wasn't a talker. That surprised me. I'd known a lot of women in my life, my mother, my late wife, the wives of business partners, women in towns, and most of them filled silence the way water fills a low place, naturally and without thinking. Nora Falk sat in silence the way a man does, comfortable in it, not needing to cover it over. She'd do her work, and there was always work, and sometimes she'd say something, a sentence or two, and then go back to quiet. I found I didn't mind it. On the 6th day, I was well enough to be useful, and I told her so. She looked at me from across the kitchen. She was at the washboard, sleeves rolled up, her arms red from the cold water, and she looked at me for a moment like she was taking my measure. "South wall needs shoring before it gets worse," she said. "Show me." The south wall was worse than I'd expected. One of the main corner posts had heaved in the frost, and the siding had pulled away from it by a good 3 inches along a 6-foot run, and there was a gap at the base where you could feel the outside air coming through. In the summer, it would just be drafty. In November, it was a problem. She had lumber, not much, but enough, and she had tools, good ones, better than I expected, and I said so. "Einar was particular about his tools," she said, not sad, just matter of fact. We worked side by side for most of the day. She knew what she was doing, not a woman pretending to know or watching while the man worked, but actually knowing, handing me things before I asked for them, holding the plank while I nailed it, reading the problem herself and suggesting the fix. At one point she said, "If you sister it from inside, you'll get more purchase," and she was right, and I did it her way. My hands weren't at full strength yet. I dropped a nail set twice. She picked it up both times without comment. We ate dinner by the stove that night, and she said, "You do good work for a man who was half dead last week." I said, "You set the bar pretty low." She almost smiled, almost. I should say something about what I'd left behind. The ranch hands, there were 11 on the main place in winter, would have gone looking when I didn't come back. My foreman, a capable man named Driscoll, would have organized a search party within 24 hours. By the time I was sitting in Nora Falk's kitchen eating biscuits, there were probably men combing the North Range with lanterns. I knew this, I thought about it, and I stayed anyway. That needs explaining, or maybe it doesn't. A man who has nearly died is not in a hurry to announce himself to the world. There was something in those first days, sick and useless, and being kept alive by a woman who didn't know my name from a fence rail. That was strange and uncomfortable, and underneath all of it, something like relief. Like I'd been set down after carrying something heavy for a very long time. I hadn't told her about the ranch. The acreage, the cattle, the account at the bank in Billings with a number in it that would have made her eyes go wide. I'd told her my name and that I'd been riding North Fence when the storm came in, and she hadn't asked anything else, and I hadn't volunteered. I know how that sounds, a rich man playing at being a drifter. But it wasn't that. I wasn't pretending to be something I wasn't. I was just, for the first time in a very long time, being seen without all the rest of it attached. Without the 400,000 acres and the reputation and the 30-second adjustment on men's faces. Just a man who'd collapsed at a fence post and been pulled back from it. On the 8th day, she asked me what I was planning to do. We were in the hay meadow. She'd had a problem with one of the cows getting into the straw pile. The old dog Hector was theoretically responsible for preventing this, but Hector had his limits, and we'd spent the morning reinforcing the gate latch and stacking the displaced straw back up against the fence. My hands were working better. The cold still got into the finger joints, but I had the grip back. "I should send word to my people," I said. "Let them know I'm alive." "Your people," she said, not a question. She was looking at me sideways, just a little, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "My ranch north of here." "How far north?" 40 miles, give or take." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "You're not a drifter." "No." Another quiet. The cow was watching us from across the fence with the particular expression of a cow that knows it's done something wrong, and is working out whether to be sorry about it. Greer, she said. Callum Greer, you're the man that owns the... Yes. She turned and looked at me full on then. I couldn't tell you what she was looking for. Whatever it was, she seemed to find it because she turned back to the fence and said, well, the latch will hold now. She didn't treat me any differently after that. That was the thing that undid me a little. I don't know what I'd expected. A change in the way she spoke to me, maybe. A new kind of deference. Most people, when they found out who I was, underwent that adjustment I mentioned, a straightening, a slight pulling back, a new care in how they said things. Nora Falk went back to work. That evening she asked me to split the rest of the pine rounds she had stacked outside the back door. The maul was heavy, and the cold made the wood hard, and I worked until I had a stack that would last her 2 weeks, and she came out once to check on the progress, said, "That'll do," and went back inside. I stood there in the last of the evening light, my breath clouding in front of me, the smell of fresh-cut pine around me, and I thought, she's not impressed by what I own. She's only interested in whether I can work. I can't tell you the last time someone had thought that about me. The 9th day it snowed again, not a blizzard, just a steady all-day snow, the quiet kind, and we stayed inside mostly. She had mending to do, and I had nothing I could do that the weather permitted, so I sat at the table and she sat across from me and we talked. Not about anything in particular. About the land, about the way it had changed since the territories opened up, about the summers, which she said were the only thing that made the winters worth it. She talked about Minnesota a little, about growing up near the water, about the particular quality of light off a lake in August that she missed and couldn't quite explain. I talked some too, about the early years before the ranch was anything, about my father's 160 acres that I'd bought 2 more parcels to join up to, and then 2 more, and then a decade of it, a piece at a time, until it was what it was. I hadn't talked about those years in a long time. People who knew me now only knew the result. They didn't know about sleeping in a lined shack through 3 winters with the wind coming through the floorboards, or the year the water rights dispute nearly broke us, or the morning I rode the whole south boundary alone and tried to count what I had and found myself thinking about my father and having to get down off the horse for a while. She listened the way she did everything else, straight on, no performance of it, actually listening. At some point she said, "You built it yourself, with some good men helping. But the idea of it was yours." "Yes." She nodded. The lamp was between us and the light fell across the side of her face, and I looked at her for a moment, the line of her jaw, the way she held herself, upright without being stiff, and I thought, she knows what work costs. She's not impressed by the size of the result. She's thinking about the cost of it. That was a different thing entirely. The 10th day I sent word. She let me use her horse, a solid gray mare, and I rode to the nearest town, 8 miles, and sent a wire to Driscoll. Alive, stopped by weather at a homestead south of the Elk Creek Fork, coming in 2 days. I didn't say more than that. The ride back I took slowly, partly because the mare earned it, and partly because I wasn't in a hurry. The sky had cleared overnight and the snow was bright and the country was wide and quiet in the way it gets after a storm, everything put back down flat and clean. I could see a long way. I could see her place from a mile out, the house, small and square, a thread of smoke from the chimney. I sat on the mare and looked at it for a while. I'd built 400,000 acres and 8 rooms, and a reputation that preceded me into rooms, and I had a foreman and 11 hands, and more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And I'd collapsed at a fence post, and a woman with 80 acres and 4 cows had pulled me back from it, and she'd done it without fuss, without wanting anything from me, without being impressed by anything except whether I could be useful. I rode back. That evening, I told her I'd be leaving in the morning. She was at the stove. She didn't turn around right away. She took the pot off the burner and set it to the side, and then she did turn, and she looked at me with that same level look she'd had from the beginning, the one that took your measure without being unkind about it. "I know," she said. I stood there. There was something I needed to say, and I wasn't sure how to say it. I'd spent 30 years being a man who knew how to talk in terms of transactions, of offers and considerations and what a thing was worth, and none of that was the right language for this. "I'd like to come back," I said. She looked at me. "Not to give you anything," I said. "Not to pay you. I know what you'll say to that, and I won't insult you with it." I stopped, started again. You didn't treat me like Callum Greer. You treated me like a man who needed to be put back together, and you did it, and I don't know that I've been looked at that plain in a long time." She was quiet. The stove ticked. Outside, the wind had come up a little, and Hector was grumbling at it from his spot by the door, the way he grumbled at everything. She said, "The south wall will need looking at again in spring, when the frost heaves back out." I said, "I know about frost heave." "I expect you do." She almost smiled again. This time it went a little further. "I left at first light." She walked me out to the gray mare, which she'd already saddled, done it herself, before I was up, and stood holding the reins while I settled my coat and checked the cinch. The morning was still and very cold, the kind of cold that makes everything precise, every sound carrying further than it should. I took the reins from her. Our hands were close for a moment. She didn't pull hers back right away. She looked up at me. She wasn't a small woman, but I had half a head on her, and she said, "You'll come back in the spring." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. She held my eyes for a moment. Then she stepped back and I put my foot in the stirrup and I went. I looked back once from the gate. She was standing in front of the house with her arms crossed against the cold, watching me go. Not waving, not calling out, just watching steady the way she did everything. The thread of smoke was already rising from the chimney again. The gray mare moved solid and even under me. The sky in the east was going from black to the color of old copper, and the whole country was flat and wide and clean, and I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Like I was worth coming back to. I came back in April. Not with anything. Not with a deed transfer or a proposal arranged through lawyers or any of the ways a man like me was accustomed to doing things. I came back on a horse with a bedroll and a good set of tools in my saddlebag, and I came alone, and I rode up to her gate and got down and knocked on the frame of it because that seemed right. She came to the door, looked at me for a moment, looked at the horse, the saddlebag, the tools, understood all of it in one glance. "South wall first," she said. "South wall first," I said. She chose me when I was nothing. That's what I want you to understand. When I was a man half dead at a fence post, nothing on me to identify me, no land and no reputation attached, just the bare fact of me, that's when she decided. Everything after was just the both of us showing up to it. I've had men work for me 30 years who never knew me the way she knew me in those 11 days. I've sat across tables from bankers and cattlemen and politicians who would have told you they knew Callum Greer, and none of them knew what she knew. She saw me without the 400,000 acres, and she chose me anyway. I asked her once, years later, what she'd thought when she found out who I was, what she'd really thought in that first moment. She said, "I thought you'd built something worth building, and I thought you didn't know what it cost you until right then." I said, "What changed after you knew?" She looked at me like the question was a little foolish, which it was. "Nothing changed," she said. "The south wall has been rebuilt twice since then. The house is larger now. We put on a full wing in '89, but she kept the original room, the one with the stove and the chair beside the bed and the low lamp. Wouldn't let me touch it. I understand why. That room is where she decided. Everything else is what came after. And a woman who can hold a dying man through a fever without asking what he's worth to her and then go back to her washing in the morning, a woman like that, you hold on to." I held on to her. Some evenings in the fall, when the light comes in low through the west window and the country goes gold and still, she'll come and stand beside me at the fence and we'll look out over it. Not saying much, just standing, her shoulder against my arm the way she has for a long time now. I built 400,000 acres. She built something in me I didn't know was broken. That's the part I'm proudest of, that she thought it was worth the doing.